I have been very vividly, or was very vividly affected by looking at the old footage of in when McDonald's first opened in Russia and the collapse of the Soviet Union. This was a hugely symbolic moment for the ordinary people who were, clambering to get this first taste of Western food, and one could argue Western freedoms. And we forget that, yes, on the one hand, the propaganda machine in Russia is very successful, that many ordinary people do support Putin, but they are by no means the majority. And there are dangers that we make accidentally Russia a sort of another North Korea, completely diplomatically isolated. And one has to ask, who does that benefit more? Does it benefit Putin, or does it benefit world peace? I mean, I think that the evidence in North Korea would be that it has not had the effect that we would hope. I think the wisest strategy is one where we are seeking to drive wedges between Putin and the Russian people. And ways of doing that, of course, are soft power in culture, but also not having indiscriminate bans on Russian things. There's been some talk recently about that, and not going and calling for blanket bans of anything that's associated with the country, because that's just not going to work, and it's going to arguably have the opposite effect than we intend.
There's also, I think, maybe potentially we can end on this: the impact of these images and these videos being seen abroad, and that potential impact on the international scene. To our listeners, this Ukraine latest, this goes out as a podcast, and there will be some extra content. Today, we interviewed Sophia Yan, the Telegraph's China correspondent in Beijing, to get her sense of what the Chinese leadership and Chinese people think about the conflict. So if you're listening to this later, go onto your podcast app, download it, and you can listen to that interview with Sophia. I promise it's absolutely fascinating and throws a lot of light onto what's going on. So I'm interested to our guests right now on how the wisdom, I guess, of how this plays. I mean, we're leading this space talking about the bombing of the hospital because it's the most horrific. It's the most it's as we've discussed, it's one of the most horrific things that's come out of this conflict so far. But surely Putin, by deploying such reckless and cruel tactics, Putin risks losing not just support internally, but the little support that remains externally as well.
Possibly. I mean, if you look at the vote